So welcome to Transform Gov, where we share real-life stories on how data and technology are changing public services and how they're designed, delivered and executed. In every episode, we go straight to the source, that is the leaders making the calls and the teams getting it done. Transform Gov is part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards and is brought to you in partnership with Accenture. And I'm Maeve Kneafsey. Today on Transform Gov, we're joined by Emer Mullins and Drennan, who are from the International Protection Office, which is part of the Department of Justice, who are winners of the 2025 Ireland eGovernment General category. This transformation programme really did fundamentally change how some of the most under pressure public servants actually operate. A service that saw applications rise by 42%, I think in just a year, could have even been less. So that was a very short period of time in which to try and respond. And of course, we know technology played a role, otherwise the guys wouldn't be here and they certainly wouldn't be a winner. So Emer and Dan, you're very welcome to Transform Gov.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Emer, I'm just going to sketch you, if you don't mind, just to set the scene for us. So, what does the International Protection Office actually do? And I know you know, but we don't know. Why does that matter so much in terms of both the applicants, but also in terms of how the state functions?
Yeah, sure. So, the International Protection Office processes claims for asylum or international protection from anybody who comes to the state. So under the Geneva Convention after the Second World War, everybody has the right to claim asylum. And so every case has to be heard on its merits. And we have a number of trained staff who are experts in hearing those cases and understand human rights law, international protection law, asylum law. And so everybody who comes, their application is registered, and then they have to be interviewed by an expert who can hear their case. And then they get either a positive or a negative decision. They may have the right to appeal, and so on. So it can be a very lengthy, detailed process.
Okay.
And the state has international obligations to hear those cases and to process every claim. So we were structured, I think, to deal with about 3,000 to 4,000 claims a year, which had been the number of applications that was kind of static over a few years. And then we experienced, after COVID, a real spike in claims.
I suppose remind people why there was a spike. I mean, by the way, the spike was huge. If I remember your application for the award, it went from 5 at the time to something like 18,000. I mean, that's huge.
It's huge.
Over 3 times as many, right?
Yeah, it more than tripled. So there are many factors that cause people to claim asylum. And after COVID, I suppose there was pent-up demand. Travel had been had been prohibited for a number of months and years in some cases. And I think we were all surprised by the sheer numbers that came to Ireland after that. And obviously the structures weren't there to cope with that demand.
I suppose, is there an element that we're an interesting place to come and live, and economic and stability?
Absolutely.
There's lots of which is a great thing, I presume, but it also puts pressure on the system. Okay.
Pressure on the system. They have the right to be, applicants have the right to be accommodated by the state, supported by the state in terms of healthcare and other needs. And if their case isn't processed within 5 months, they have the right to work.
Okay.
So it is an attractive location, and Ireland upholds all of its international obligations.
Okay, I didn't realise that if it's not processed within 5 months, they have a right to work.
If they don't get a decision on their claim, a first decision within 6 months, they have the right to apply to work.
Okay.
And so then, it becomes an attractive location.
Right. Okay. So the onus is on us to process quickly, right?
Yes, and
both in terms of the applicant's point of view, but also our own in terms of administration.
Yeah, and absolutely the obligation not to leave people in limbo for any length of time, but to give them the chance to work and contribute and integrate a little into society.
Yeah, and I mean, we can argue about this, but we certainly seem to need people, right, with certain skills. And of course, it's complex. And I'm interested to talk with you guys about who's involved, because it's so many organisations, in terms of, you can just imagine, just from what you've told us, how many different areas within government and the state it touches. But in terms of what the registration application was like, before, just give us a hint or a sense of what it was about.
So we operate a public office on Mount Street in Dublin too, and it was very much an analog process. We had officers, teams of officers sitting with applicants as they come in. And it can be quite difficult. People are coming in difficult circumstances quite often. And a very analog process. Everything was written down on paper, and you're trying to understand handwriting and things like that. Now, one of the most important things I think we done in terms of our reception was to bring in our cultural mediators through the international organisation Migration. Those were instrumental in helping us communicate with the applicants.
'Cause, I mean, they're coming. They're stressed, right? Possibly, probably.
Yeah.
And the other one is cultural difference in a language. I mean, that's a lot just to deal with before anything even starts.
And it's people from all over the world. And of course, when people are coming in, they want to tell us their life stories. And you can imagine a human life on paper, how that might look. It is huge.
Yeah.
So that's why it was so important for us to become a digital first organisation. And I say digital first, we were digital first, but not digital only. So
Well, how long would it take, rather than getting into the digital, just to give us a sense of it, how long would it take for an applicant to register and be processed?
Oh, it could take a few hours. It could take 3 to 4 hours. It depends on the applicant's case, specific case. It depends on if they're with a family, if they have children, and you have to create that environment for the child also. There's quite a lot of processing involved in the start of that, because you want to be able to get them get their best story forward.
Yeah.
And that helps us as well in our processing, so that you're not constantly going back to the applicant asking more. That becomes stressful. So you're trying to get as much information as you can at the start.
Yeah.
And that will inform then how we continue on in the process.
And the funny thing is,
Sorry, maybe you could be waiting though up to 18 months for an interview.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the initial application, which is generally done on the day. And then the International Protection Accommodation Service deals with the applicants and makes sure that they're accommodated and they have what they need, if they need urgent health care and so on, or if they have any vulnerabilities. But then simply because of the sheer caseload and the pending cases, they go into a queue. So it could be a number of months before they get an interview, and then after the interview, a caseworker has to make a decision. Are they entitled to international protection or a lesser protection or not? And if they're not, then they have the right to appeal. And the International Protection Appeals Tribunal hears those through panels of barristers and solicitors. It's almost like, a tribunal, a quasi-judicial independent function. And they also have a lengthy caseload. So that can take another year, 2 years. The average length of time that people were in the system was 2 years and 9 months.
Okay. So that's the before, right? And just in terms of, waiting for decisions, that demand is massive, isn't it? And as you say, there was a backlog as well as all of the elements. But who's involved? Like, I was looking at the details you provided for your entry. I mean, there was lots of, not surprising organisations, like the legal process, but also the coroner. So I was, there was a really wide range of different organisations that you have to.
They weren't actually fully involved in that in particular, but that was more in terms of how our model was scalable, and we were able to share that with other parts of the department and other agencies. The model that we developed is easily shareable in that way and can be taken up by other areas. So Coroner's Court was one of those areas that came to us and asked us for advice.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you could share the learnings in the framework.
Yes, exactly.
On site, there are a number of organisations and departments, though. As I said, we worked with the Accommodation Service, which at the time was part of the Department of Children, has just merged with Justice last year. Department of Social Protection, people are given PPSN numbers. We could have social care workers doing vulnerability assessments. The HSE was on site to make sure that there was a triage when demand was so high that single men in particular were unaccommodated and were helped in other ways. But I suppose that just shows how the state was not ready for the surge in demand across all sort of areas of international protection, and conflated at the same time with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Ireland took part in the temporary protection programme for Ukrainians fleeing the war. And we had over 100,000 Ukrainians in Ireland at the same time.
Okay.
So all accommodation services, all processing services, teams had to double job had to, each unit had to release staff to go and try and scale up to meet all of this demand. And it was a huge pressure on the department, which despite that, I think we did.
Was it a tipping point then at that stage?
It was certainly a burning platform. If you talk about, John Cotter's change, the 7 steps to change or whatever, we had the burning platform. There was no question we had to do something. Both for staff, the state overall, and the applicants as well, because it wasn't fair to leave people that long without a decision on their future, really. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm going to get into this a bit more than nitty-gritties, but I'm just going to take a very quick break because we need to pause for a message from our partner, Accenture. But don't go away, we'll be back in just a moment.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So we're back now with Emer and Dan, who are from the IPO office in the Department of Justice, and we're talking about their transformation digitally of all of their services. So it's not one organisation, as we said, it's a whole lot of different organisations working together. But in terms of where did you start? Because I mean, you had huge ambition. You said, right, we're going to have to digitise end-to-end service, which isn't just your organisation; it's all the other ones that you interact with. So, how did you kind of approach it?
And actually, I mean, I think, Dan, you're a better place to talk about how it was because you were working there. I came in to lead on the modernisation effort, and actually, we didn't start with digitisation. We started with how do we scale up to meet demand and what is the problem we're trying to fix? Because as we know, technology is only ever an enabler.
Absolutely.
So we had to start with process engineering. Like where are of all of the steps in the process? And there were multiple. Where can we streamline? Look at almost like a lean, and we train staff in lean and agile process engineering. Where can we streamline?
And Emer, what was your background? Where did you come from into this?
My background was with NGOs. I worked for international development organisations for a number of years, and also in the private sector. And when I joined the government in 2020 during COVID, I joined Immigration Service Delivery and started looking at improving and developing customer service and trying to sort of modernise some of that, as well as managing the registration office. And I did an MBA during the same time and was just very interested then in business, kind of engineering business development. So I think that probably, when I was asked to go and work in the IPO, I was happy to go and look at it as a project, as an outsider, if you like. And
obviously bring your experience.
And bring that experience. But the question was, what are we trying to fix?
Yeah.
And how do we do it? And at the same time, we knew we needed a massive scale-up of staff to meet the demand. So we ended up with 4 strategic objectives. One was around the infrastructure, because we needed to operate in more locations than Mount Street. The resourcing, we needed to triple staff from 200 to 600. And we needed to then look at process engineering at the same time. And then came, is there a digital solution? So it was intense. It was very high pressure for a while. All of the external environment with people not being accommodated. If you remember, there were tents outside Mount Street. It was a difficult environment internally, externally. And we had to
almost under siege, weren't you, really?
Well, yeah, not. I think not quite that. It was a horrific time for the applicants with nowhere to go and feeling safer there probably than they might have elsewhere. So it was very tough for everybody, applicants and staff, who didn't want to see them in that position. Nobody did.
No, and then just know that everything you're doing is going to try and contribute to fixing that.
To fixing
there's a huge incentive, isn't there?
There was, yeah, but keeping the show on the road while you build a new engine, or flying the plane while you build the Concorde. It was a big challenge, and scaling up with new staff, while relying on the current experts, of which, Dan, you were one, to help us see how to fix it.
And Dan, what's your background?
So I come from a project management background, actually. I come from construction. So this was quite new to me in a way.
Are you new to the department and the public sector?
When I first joined the modernisation team, I joined it as a higher executive officer, and I was quite new to the department. I had previously worked with agriculture, working on Brexit down in the ports.
Oh, yes, I remember that. And in fact, talked to Louise Jevons about that.
That's right, having worked
for
with Louise.
Transform Gov, yeah.
Yeah. And that was a very interesting time too. And that kind of gave me the, would say, insights into how project management can be done in the civil service. And then when I was in the IPO, we got our first taste of the new technology, and I thought this was really great. As I said before, you can imagine a human life on a paper file is quite huge, very hard to get through.
Yeah.
And we found it much easier to get through on a digital platform.
And just to go back, because a lot of people might think it's a contradiction, right? That you bring in a technology, right, to digitise a process, but you're also hiring a whole lot of staff. So let's say you hired 300 extra people. Would you have had to hire 600 extra if you hadn't? I mean, think about that, because you probably would have, would you?
Well, one of our starting points was absolutely that. You can't just keep hiring staff because the caseload increases, because if the process is wrong, any number of staff aren't going to help. So we spent a lot of time looking at process, and we streamlined it to a very significant degree. And the difficulty was, with all of these paper files, they didn't flow in any linear fashion. You couldn't say, okay, A for application and D over here for decision. It could go through multiple iterations, and you could have 100 pages in a file in a different language that had to be translated. And so, people sometimes, I think, have the impression, well, what takes 2 years? How can that possibly be? It's very complicated. It is a human life.
Something that's evolved.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe the reason for something being done a certain way doesn't exist anymore, but you don't know that until you unwrap it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
this isn't unique to the public sector, is it? I mean, it's just what happens over time. And I suppose on top of that, did you get resistance then? Because you're asking people to change, or you're asking a flow to change, and it's not just your own flow you're changing, it's probably going to be other people's flow. So how did you deal with that? Or was that even an issue? I'm guessing it was.
I would say it certainly was. Back when I started, there was only 200 people in the IPO, and they were very used to this analog system, and very used to the process the way it was. And I do think, however, though, people were incentivized to buy in, notwithstanding the volume of applications, but everything else that was going on around that area. And I think in the end it was quite easy. So what we done was we had a very robust change management framework in Drive.
People don't understand Drive. Maybe gives a little.
Yeah, so Drive basically means desire, review, implement, verify, and embed. So it gives you a framework then to kind of interact with your stakeholders. And one of the main ways we got stakeholders together was to create a change champion network, which was quite successful, I have to say. And that's where we got the SMEs from around the organisation together in a room, and they would help us define their processes. And then when we were creating new workflows and new processes, helping that training happen, because as you can imagine, trying to train 400 new staff is quite a mammoth task. So we really relied on these change champions. And of course, it gave people in the organisation then a new way to learn new things, outside of what they would normally be doing. So I think it was really successful in that way.
And in terms of the workflow, because I know that kind of underpins everything, and I'd say it in one word, but I know how complex it is. How long did it take you to really devise that new workflow?
Oh, that was probably one of the, over a number of months, I think, with a number of experts at each stage. And we're very lucky that Justice has, you mentioned Louise Jevons there, our CIO. We have a really expert change technology and innovation team, and they were our business partners. And that was critical to our success. But they come from the place of solutions and service design and technology. And we had to step back and say, okay, come and visit the IPO. Put all your preconceptions out of your head and walk the floor with us, and we will show you what happens. And
is this an internal team, by the way?
It's an internal team to Justice, and they work on Justice as such a broad remit across civil and criminal. And this was one project for them. So they put a dedicated team on it. But they came into the IPO, and if we had taken all the paper files and laid them flat, we probably would have gone to Limerick. and they had no conception. When we said this is a paper-based,
Process.
and then they really got it. And we're saying, okay, so we want to digitize every file, and we want a future digital application, and we want it in English only. We are not taking 100 pages of materials in a foreign language. Obviously, applicants still provide materials in their own language, but we support them with interpreters and with translators and so on. So it really simplified it. You come in to apply now. You're assigned a cultural mediator, an expert in your area, your language, who sits with you, walks you through it, and helps you put in your application directly onto a tablet, directly into our system.
And you had to go back then, didn't you? You had a backlog.
Yes.
And so you must have had a huge amount of documents to try and just get into this system.
We're done.
To digitize.
Well, it's colossal.
So I remember that.
Yes, thereabouts. Over 35,000 actual case files, and these are very huge documents. It was a colossal mammoth task.
Okay.
There was myself and 18 other officers dedicated solely to getting this done.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's that hard push. It's hard to describe what we had ahead of us internally.
Okay, so you didn't have... Yeah. So you're literally physically scanning it.
Very physical job.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And you're trying to maximise the system, of course. And but I think it was so important that we done that. It helped us increase our processing times. It gave our staff a digital platform to start operating on these case files. Having been a caseworker myself, there was nothing worse than pulling open a file on your desk and, your whole desk is taken up by paper and you're trying to figure out here, there and everywhere on it. Whereas with the platform, after digitalisation, we were able to have everything in one area,
and
labelled and categorised properly, and it just made things so much easier.
So, I mean, I interrupted you because if you like, the flow changed so that you could log, I'm an applicant, an application online.
Yeah.
And then it's picked up by the department or your office.
Yeah.
And then, there's a flow going on there. And you brought in digital interviews as well, did you? So that people didn't have to come in?
That's right, yeah. So we had a project on online interviews. So this allowed us then to interview applicants outside of the office. We have interview rooms in the office, and traditionally we would have brought people in and interviewed them. Where this really worked out was for people who, because of the accommodation issues, and people ended up in different parts of Ireland, not as easy to get to Dublin. It helped them greatly in that respect, but it also allowed us to scale up our interviewing greatly as well, which was super important, obviously, for us. Able to process more interviews. If you take an interview, it can take 3.5 hours to 4 hours every time, So it was important to have that.
I think you tripled it. Is that right? 3 times as many interviews.
We did.
I mean, that's huge. Yeah. And in terms, are there pros and cons though? For online interviews, because I know I was reading some of the feedback that you had. Yeah. I mean, most of it was positive, but have you learned things about how to do it better as opposed to not doing it at all, if you like?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So, a lot of it is dependent on internet connection. Now the rollout of the National Broadband Plan has helped greatly in that respect, but it's the platform you use as well, and we found that Zoom has been especially effective in that respect. But technical difficulties can happen. It happens to us all at the best of times when we're trying to have team meetings and everything else. So it's important then that we offer an alternative to that if the applicant is still encountering issues. And what's also important is that during the interview you're in a quiet space. There's it's soundproof because people are disclosing very personal details in these interviews, there is difficulties. There's infrastructural difficulties, there's technical difficulties, but I think even if we were able to get 20 or 50 done a week, that's a huge increase on what we were already being able to do. So I think overall it was successful, even though we have encountered technical difficulties, and hopefully as the technology continues to get better and better and internet in the country gets better and better, I don't see those problems persisting.
And in terms of being able to connect with somebody and kind of does it make it more difficult for the applicant sometimes to communicate?
We've had reports from caseworkers of problems with building rapport at times, because you have that separation, that separation between the person and the applicant. However, we have had a lot of applicants come to us through the local authority integration teams, through the local councils, asking for more. They prefer this in times. So some people get very anxious in person.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a balance, isn't it?
It is a
everything's going to suit
balance.
everybody. And I mean, I've seen, some people I know that are applying for asylum, and they, are living in the middle of nowhere, and then getting up to Dublin is stressful in another language. You don't understand the public transport system, and by the time they're there, they're completely
And of course, if you've 3 or 4 children with you,
exactly.
it becomes infinitesimally more difficult.
Somebody has to mind them. So I mean, there's always a balance, isn't there? And in terms of decision making, increasing decision making, is there anything you didn't expect, I suppose, from the new system, unexpected kind of positives and negatives outcomes of digitising a service,
I think we did quite a few pilots, and we actually did kind of time and motion studies with the paper-based and the digital, and we were able to show even on application it saved 14 minutes per person. And some days we have over 100 applicants.
Wow.
That's a lot of time and staff time. So being able to show staff as well the benefits, every little quick win, because sometimes these big transformation projects, people are just so fatigued 3 years on when you're like, well, I still don't see any difference.
I do things that long. I don't believe it. I've lost faith.
Exactly. So we were really clear. We had to communicate positively every win and celebrate that with staff. So that carried on when you're not chasing a paper file, when you're not wondering whose desk it's on, when someone in admin might inadvertently leave a section of it somewhere else, when everything you need is on the case management system in front of you, and it's translated and it's ready to go. It makes it so much faster for you to make a decision. So the person who does the interview makes a recommendation and writes up a report, and then it's for quality control, it's overseen by a more senior officer. And I think the IPO last year went from maybe 5,000 decisions in 1 year to over 20,000 last year.
Wow.
So it really has, now that obviously the staff scaled up as well as the digitisation, but overall, because we're about 8 weeks away from the introduction of the new EU Migration Pact, which changes all the international asylum rules again, and we're piloting and training for that now.
And is it big changes, do you think, coming down the track?
Very big changes.
What kind of things should we expect?
Very big changes. So for the first time, we're going to have statutory timelines both for first instance decisions and appeals. For certain cohorts of applicants, such as those from safe countries, those coming from a country with a low recognition rate, they will be eligible for what's called a border procedure, where we have 12 weeks to appeal and another 12 weeks to removal if that's required. So it will
scale with speed, right?
Scale and speed. And if we hadn't prepared, if we hadn't done this digitisation programme, I don't think the state would have been near as confident in being ready, because there are new legal EU requirements that have to be met. So 6 months, I think, is the longest we can take to make any decision. So it's very different. And, applicants will be entitled to the same reception conditions and so on. And just being able, I suppose, to work with them now from day one to say, we've developed an applicant portal. So it's like a mygov.ie account.
Okay.
So they come in and they register an account and they set up their own email and they have their own secure space, and everything in it is digital. So all correspondence will go through this, all notifications will go through this. So we cut out paper post. Now, there are cases when that won't suit people, but the vast majority are very happy. They all have an email address, they set up an account. So it should be much more applicant friendly. They'll have everything in one secure place in front of them. They will know the status of their application. They'll be able to see the timelines. They'll be able to give their legal reps access to their documents. So very, very different procedure. And hopefully, we've been piloting, we've done about 1,300 cases now to these new timelines, and we've managed to deliver those timelines. So far.
But again, you wouldn't be able to do it if the platform wasn't there.
No.
And in terms of the process on your side, is that all digitized? So I presume when a case is put forward, I understand that's through digital, it's reviewed. But then when that has to go for another review, because I think you mentioned that it's an internal review, is it another review after that?
Yes.
If I put it forward saying I recommend yes, it goes where?
If it's I suppose a subsidiary protection, which is in full refugee status, you can appeal and say, I actually think I deserve full international protection. So there are a number of ways where you can appeal, but if it's a yes and you're happy with it, that's it. You move to our integration colleagues and hopefully be able to support it to get on with your life. If it's a negative decision, you can appeal and you are still accommodated while you go through the appeal. That will also change under the Pact. Some cases may be removed before they appeal. So it'll be very different. But we have enhanced that case management system we developed. So now it is truly end to end. So people at the airport will use it, the border management, the Garda National Immigration Bureau will use it. The Legal Aid Board will be able to access it to get any documents. The tribunal will be able to access it, and our returns colleagues. So we will have one system where everything relating to one applicant is available to the applicant and to all of the people who engage with them through their journey.
Okay, so it's a truly collaborative platform then, right across the system, which is amazing. And in terms of I suppose technology, because the CIOs, I know they're going, well, yeah. What did they build it on? What was your combinations? What kind of platform had you?
We're a Microsoft organisation, and other parts of immigration service delivery are building out a Microsoft Dynamics platform. We went with the Power Apps model for flexibility and speed, and because we had so many legacy systems that were not integrated, that using APIs was actually a faster. It was possible. It was a faster. So we don't know. We may very well end up in Dynamics in the future as it evolves, because it's also a multi-year roadmap. And especially now as we move to the Pact. But we're really happy. It's very powerful and it delivers everything we need. I mean, we were on Lotus Note systems or Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
We didn't have modern technology.
Yes, I was very scared when I seen Lotus Notes.
I know, but it's amazing how
it has been a great platform.
Time moves on, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of dashboards and data, is that giving you insights that you just never would have had? A total unexpected things. Like, oh gosh, that's really interesting. We can do that. I mean, is that? Can you share anything around those things?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a dashboard now that's refreshed daily that tells us everything from date of arrival to where they are in the system. We're linking in now with the accommodation service to understand exactly where they're accommodated in the system, and so on and so on. So we literally daily can see how many applications, how many nationalities, interpreters needed, language. We plan our whole response to scheduling interviews, to booking interpreters. Everything happens now from the one system. And I think we built a shared data platform just very recently to pull in a person's full immigration history. So you may have had a visa to be here before, you may have looked for family reunification. All of those sit in different parts of the department. And while we have one overall immigration database, some sections of it were very segmented. So now we can pull all that together and we can have one report on everybody.
So textualize everybody, sorry.
We can see the trends as well. We can see, how many people are coming from X country, that kind of thing. We can prepare them. We can have evidence-based legislation, evidence-based processing, and implement change on that basis. Kind of like what we would do with priority countries, with priority country legislation. We can see who are our top people coming in at the moment, and we can prioritise those to meet that demand based on these dashboards and that data, And
have you seen a system like this anywhere else in any other countries?
So a lot of countries member states were more advanced than us when it came to the use of digital applications and so on. But we're hearing from quite a few colleagues that our model of a truly end-to-end system that will be accessible to all of the people who have a stake with the applicant along the journey seems to be very new.
Good. Well, hopefully the rest of Europe are listening and they can go and call on you and get your advice and feedback. But if you were talking to teams who are starting on a project, because it sounds to me like you're already helping other colleagues within the public service here in Ireland.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? Look, things to avoid, I suppose. I mean, I know people's a big part of it, but are there things you've learned that you would say, look, if I were doing it again, I'd probably do this?
I would, in terms of coming in cold, not having a team, and not trying to impose on an extremely busy business the need for existing staff to try and figure out how to do it better when you're just already swamped. So I think a critical success factor for me was the programme structure, which included a governance model that had an implementation board that met monthly with senior staff who could make decisions for their area and direct their teams to deliver on critical pieces of work, and then overseen by a programme board which was chaired by the second most senior person in the department.
Okay.
And that really helped, I think, everybody understand the importance of this, the prioritisation that the department was giving it. And then equally at a more local level, I suppose, I set up a modernisation team, a dedicated team, a little innovation hub within the business, from the business, but fully freed up from their normal day-to-day to just focus on this. And the critical success factor there, of course, is relationships. Not the technology, not the sexy iPads we're using now to look at this, shiny and new. We're not dealing with widgets, we're dealing with humans and very private, personal stories. And we need to be respecting their life journeys and how they ended up here and acting in the most dignified, professional manner. And the teams do, they're fantastic. But the relationships, both with the NGOs and other partners working with us, but across the department and outside the department when we needed others to help us figure things out. That's just critical. So it does all come back to people. Technology is really only part of a solution.
And have you got experience, from, or rather feedback from the applicants themselves that indicate the kind of improved experience for them or positive experience from them?
Just from what I've heard from local authority integration teams, really, how they find the process being much more accessible through the portal. The online interviews have been particularly successful with applicants. I think having the cultural mediators there also has been, essential, because you have people coming with different dialects and everything, and different cultural backgrounds. So many nuances. Yeah. And I think we're a much more accessible organisation now as a result. So I would think so.
And of course, what you said from the beginning, the governance, right? So if you imagine all these pressurised people trying to do their day job, and if they're trying to figure out what the priorities are, unless there's that seniority saying, no, that definitely needs to get, that'll be later. It can get really messy and then people get resentful. So it sounds like you had that
the governance structure was one of the strongest parts of the modernisation programme. Having those levels of governance, those checks and balances, were so important, especially when you're trying to deliver at such scale and at a quick pace, I might add.
And people delivering when it's not in their own performance objectives. You need to use soft influence to get others to come along and buy into your vision. And, if you say it takes a village, it genuinely, it does, because everything from finance to HR to corporate services, we had new buildings, we had a dedicated budget, we had to report on, we had every part of justice was affected
training
by this. Training everywhere, the project management office, the service design colleagues. So they almost all had to come together and treat us as almost like a little business or subsidiary that they had to help us to improve. But that's actually the beauty of, I think, a government department that is very experienced in delivering large projects and large-scale public projects, because those resources do exist. And it certainly was a huge help.
Look, it's incredible. And I suppose you've got future plans as well, have you? Things coming down the track? You might want to give us a little sneak preview.
Well, we do, because from the 12th of June, the EU Migration Pact comes into force. And from that day, all applications will take place in City West on a fully new digital procedure. and all of the cases in the current model will still be processed under the current legislation. So we have a brand new International Protection Bill 2026 to deliver by June.
Okay. No pressure?
No pressure. And as I say, all of these new regulations, new procedures. So we're scaling up in City West, which the state bought as a national reception centre.
Okay.
And yeah, all eyes on June 12th.
Okay. Well, look, it's been fascinating. Both of you, Dan and Emer, thank you so much for coming in and sharing it. And congratulations again on winning your award. And I hope you're going to be entering again this year, because it sounds like you've done lots of... Don't have to be huge projects, you know. They can be small, minor projects, pilots, as long as they're making a difference, right? And that's going to be opening very soon, by the way. So just, you know. But look, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maeve.
And we appreciate you coming in to see us in the studio. So before I go, I just want to thank the team here. It's studio manager Peter Bryce, as always, video editor Neil Horner, sound engineer Lee Brennan, and videographer Richie Ryan. You think I'd know it by now, I would have to look at my notes, but I don't. But anyway, thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Transform Gov.